Howdy, it's Armeleon here. This is the first part of my instructional video series for Shroud of the Avatar. The series is not aimed for total beginners, so I expect you to know how to put skills on your bar, etc. In this part I will cover and give some tips on some basic skill and combat mechanics. Hopefully some of you will find this very helpful, so that you'll be able to hunt faster, take on harder challenges, and if you're like me, you'll also have a lot more fun doing it, as understanding these systems will actually make the combat experience a lot more complex and involve a lot more tactical choices. In future episodes I'll probably cover specific builds, specific hunting areas and such. If you have any suggestions about topics, please do let me know on the YouTube comments, on the official forums, Discord, or in game. The video in the background is my typical farming run, and during the run you'll see all the tips and systems demonstrated, but they may not be timed very well with the video, with the voiceover, but that's because I chose to try and keep the voiceover as clear as possible instead. So, the basic skill system in Shroud of the Avatar is actually a combination of a very traditional MMO hotbars, like in World of Warcraft, etc., combined with the deck system that is actually very similar to many card games, such as Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering. When building a deck, you have the option to choose which mechanic you prefer to use, or combine both, which I'm always doing, and you'll hear the reasons for that later in this video. So, the deck system works exactly like an imaginary deck of cards, or in this case, an imaginary deck of glyphs. Every second or so, you're dealt a random glyph that is still left in your deck, as in it's left because it's not already on your action bar. Only exceptions to this are if there is no slot on your bar for the glyph, you get dealt nothing. Similarly, if every single glyph in your deck is already on your bar, you also get nothing. The concept of imagining a deck of cards has several implications on how to use the system most efficiently or more efficiently. These become more apparent as I explain why I have certain archetypes for the way in which I use different skills. Also, instead of having cards in your hand, you have glyphs on your action bar. When creating the deck, you get to choose which glyphs you put in and how many of each are included, but also which hotbar slots each specific glyph can be put into. Each glyph is always dealt into the leftmost empty slot that specific glyph can go to. You can assign several glyphs into one slot on your bar, as well as several glyphs into one slot. I will include a screenshot of the deck I am using, and you can see that I have used both of these mechanics, as well as I have some hotbar slots that can only get the one single glyph. So, to me, there's three different archetypes for a way to use a skill in a deck. The first one is really simple. It is simply having the skill locked on my combat bar. This means it acts exactly like a traditional hotbar skill. It has a cooldown, it's available every X seconds, and it does not affect your deck of glyphs at all. In the deck I'm using in this video, I have locked Sprint, Etheric Feedback and Blink. The reason I would lock a skill is I will never need them more frequently than the cooldown allows me to use them, and the plus side is that this way I don't have the downside of getting this glyph when I would actually want to get something else on the random glyph I'm getting. The second way I'm using glyphs is having a single glyph of this skill in the deck, and I have assigned a single slot for only this skill. This works quite similar to the lock skills, but the frequency at which I can use this skill is not limited by the cooldown, but rather by how often I am dealt this glyph from my deck. You can see examples of this kind of use in the demonstration. There's Healing Touch and Mind Lock. Mind Lock is actually very important to note here. I am basically always using Mind Lock. Using Mind Lock in the way I'm explaining here allows you great control over what glyphs you're dealt from the deck. They come randomly, but as long as you have every single glyph in your deck already on your hotbar, then when you're spamming a skill, you're actually every single second or whatever the frequency is, you are dealt exactly the glyph you want to use. So you can see me, I'm spamming Chain Lightning and sometimes I'm spamming Heal and so on. I would say it's my experience that it is always worth sacrificing that one slot on your action bar to have Mind Lock. The third and most important archetype is a stackable skill. In this example you'll see that I am stacking Immolation, Ring of Fire, Chain Lightning and Dash. I have assigned 5 slots in my bar for the 4 stackable skills. This is important because it always allows me to stack my skills, as there's never a situation where I don't have 2 of the same glyph available on my bar, so I can always stack them. Stacking skills simply means combining glyphs of the same skill on top of each other. The easiest way to stack skills is simply pressing both buttons at the same time. The stacked glyph ends up in a slot that you press second. Stacking glyphs both increases the efficiency of the skill, for example damage, as well as reduces the focus cost. This also means that each glyph of a stackable skill dealt from the deck is an absolute gain with no downsides. The implication here is that if you are not being dealt a glyph for any reason, you're losing this absolute gain and therefore using the system inefficiently. This happens to me when my fingers can't keep up with moving and stacking skills and using skills, and therefore there is no room, no free slots in my combat bar into which the glyph can go to. In other words, when I'm playing badly. This also happens when all the glyphs in my deck are already on my action bar. The second scenario is actually not that bad, because in this case you already have all the skills you want in your action bar ready to use, and basically not having more glyphs is just a trade-off against how often you get the glyphs you want to use, so that's a balancing choice when not stacking the glyphs you could stack is actually just playing badly. You can make stacking a lot more easier for yourself if you set up your UI properly. You can maybe get some tips looking at how I have set it up, but I'll probably go into this in more detail in another video. As you can see, I have chosen 3 damage skills as stackable skills. Chain Lightning is my spam skill, and the 2 fire skills are used quite infrequently, as in maybe once per room, or at most once per room. In most cases I have stacked up everything besides Chain Lightning, which allows me to spam Chain Lightning. Most of the time you want to stack the skill, all your damage skills, because usually damage is your most important output. It's it can be kind of confusing, but actually it's most important to stack the skills you use infrequently, such as long-lasting fire damage skills like Immolation and Ring of Fire. The last stackable skills is Dash for me, simply because I need to have a fourth skill to have the minimum amount of glyphs in my deck, and I don't really need any other damage skills, so I just went for the extra movement speed from stacking Dash instead. Well, why wouldn't you especially want to stack the skills you use most frequently? Basically because actually with most skills, spamming without stacking, using every glyph you're dealt as a separate glyph, is usually more damage per second than stacking, but you'd end up using a lot more focus than you would when you, for example, see me stacking Chain Lightning up to 2 most of the time. You'll see me doing that in this video, and that's because I need to stack Chain Lightning up to 2, then use it up to 2, then use it just to maintain my focus, and I don't have to stop to regen at all when I'm doing this run. As a little tip, not many people know that you can actually swap between your equipped deck and your alternate deck in combat without losing the stacked glyphs, if both decks have the glyphs. I used this trick, for example, in the last room of this run you're seeing here. I swapped to a deck with Corpse Explosion just because having that single skill I don't really need it before it, but in the last room it saves me at least 30 seconds. You can do this, as I said, you can do this in combat while moving. So for example, you can swap to a different PvP deck when fighting ranged or melee and so on. So, to summarize, have skills locked if you're not bothered by the cooldown. Have them as free glyphs, but as a single assigned glyphs if you sometimes want to spam them, but the skills are still secondary to you, like Healing Touch for me. Stack them if you want to maximize their output. Always build your deck with the max amount of glyphs. Always build your decks to max out the amount of glyphs you're dealt. A missed glyph is always lost experience, lost power in PvP, lost gold. So I'll include a screenshot of the build I'm using in the video description. I hope you got some useful tips, and please let me know if you have any topics in mind on which you'd like to see a video later. Thanks.